So let's get started. I want to just issue a huge thank you and a welcome to everybody. My name is Ann Ayers. I am the Dean of the Colorado Women's College here at the University of Denver. I am also the head of the co-lead of the Community Plus Values initiative that we have on this campus that is inviting members of the DU community and then members of our larger community to help us think about values that drive a sense of belonging. And so we're really excited to be piloting a webinar today. We have some terrific questions that we're going to be asking of Dr. Shelly Smith-Acuña. Shelly is a colleague of mine, which is a huge privilege for me. She is the Dean of the Graduate School for Professional Psychology here on campus. And Shelly received her PhD from Loyola University in Chicago and focuses on family therapy. She has a particular emphasis on gender, cultural, and multi-generational issues. But mostly what I would love to say about Shelly is I hope that you all through this webinar experience can feel what it feels like to sit next to Shelly. To be in a meeting with her kind of gives you this sense of calm. And so I just couldn't think of anybody better to help us start this conversation about how we can take care of ourselves amidst everything that's going on in the world. So Shelly, I'm thrilled that you're here. I also want to introduce Abigail Richards, who will be doing the interviewing on our behalf. I will go off of camera here in a minute. Abigail is a graduate fellow on the Community Plus Values project. So we've gotten to know each other over the course of the last 6 months. I was not at all surprised when she raised her hand and said, I'd be happy to give this interview a try. She has terrific energy. She's a master's candidate at our Corbell School here on campus. I think you're just going to really enjoy having an opportunity to hear from both of them. So in terms of protocol, I just kind of want to remind everybody we have 140 people and counting with us right now. So what I'm going to do is leave the chat window open. I'll be taking a look at that and following through with all the questions that come, and I will gather those questions and then pop back in with about 20 minutes left and on your behalf, ask those questions of Shelly. And I'm sure that Abigail can add a little bit too, just kind of in her empathetic way. I think we're all going through this together. And so I'm also going to just keep that in mind as you're kind of revealing things in the chat window. I want you to know this is being recorded, we'll do everything we can to protect people's privacy and dignity, but just be aware sort of the forum that you're in. And then I would ask for a little bit of grace for us. We're piloting this. I've seen some terrific questions from Nancy Richmond, from Franklin, that are asking about, could we use a question and answer? Can we allow people to raise their hands? I think with the quantity of people that we have, we're gonna just kind of go with this format for today. But I will take all of that and feedback back to our team because I think we'll be doing these a few times a week going forward. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over thank you. Let's just get going.
Yeah. So I think a couple people have heard us kind of banter as we were waiting, but I just really want to start off and ask, like, how are you doing? How are you doing?
Yeah, I have to start out first of all saying thanks to Anne and the great ideas in organizing this, and thanks to Abigail for being here. And the funny thing with all of this is I've been on this committee with Abigail, and so I've heard her wonderful comments, but I'm really excited to have this chance just to have a conversation with you about these things.
Yeah,
and thank you for asking how I'm doing. And I'm doing so. I feel a little bit overwhelmed. It's mind-boggling. I have a hard time sorting through, just trying to make sense of everything that's going on, which has been hard to do. And also, I loved the talk of this webinar, for example, like that self-care in a virtual world, trying to figure out how to turn to other people and stay connected is really important. And I feel like I have a lot of opportunities for that. So that really helps. So it's a lot. What about you?
I'm okay. I'm okay for now. I think I've just been keeping busy. It's still final, so still trying to complete assignments and support others. And it hasn't, I feel like it hasn't hit me yet. And I think next week when I'm like, oh, okay, I'm done with school, but like I have to stay here and I don't know, it hasn't fully hit me, but I just keep busy, which is probably not best. Yeah, so one of my first questions is really I think we all have different roles and different intersecting identities. For instance, you're a mom, you're an administrator, you're a professor, a human. How are you dealing with balancing personal and professional life and everything and the different responsibilities you hold?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think when I had mentioned that it feels overwhelming, I think as a dean here at the university and thinking about the changes in universities and all that sense of responsibility feels really huge. I feel kind of lucky in a way, though. I am a mom, but my kids are grown. And so having that connection, but not having kids underfoot, I know
Yeah.
with this webinar, one of the things that the university is really hoping to do is to not just be a connector, but to be a resource in a variety of ways. And I can't imagine going through this whole situation, trying to work from home and having kids around at the same time. And so I'm hoping that we can think about, not just what we're going to cover today, but what else people need in terms of that balance. For me, the balance of, having my personal life and facing all of this is a lot. It's hard.
Yeah. So what are some things that you're doing to take care of yourself, given everything you just said?
Yes. This is one of my great outlets for self-care is cooking. And the idea that, another outlet for self-care for me is restaurants, and to not be able to go to restaurants feels kind of shocking. But at the same time, I'm looking at all of my cooking magazines and cookbooks and thinking of how I'm going to try some things that I haven't had time to try.
Oh, that's fun. We briefly spoke about this also earlier, and I spoke about unplugging and the importance of unplugging. But I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to balance the desire to stay informed. It's changing every day. We get a new email every day, and there's a different CNN update every day. But how do you stay informed and engaged, and the need to limit how much information you can handle in dealing with your anxiety?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a great question. We were chatting about this, and I'm happy to give all these answers, but I hope that you'll chime in too, Abigail,
Yeah.
in terms of your strategies, because for me, well, first of all, I think this whole crisis gives us an opportunity to take a step back and think about our relationship to ourselves. And the key about that balancing act is being honest with yourself about when the information is helping you and when it's hurting you, and to kind of monitor that. So I think we're all going to be curious, and with all of the media so accessible, it's kind of irresistible to tune in, but to be really honest about, how do you have enough information, and then what are the healthy ways that you unplug and take a step back from that? And it sounds like you've gone through that actual process.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a lot of group chats, but one of my group chats, we've just kind of devoted to not sharing any news that's related to what's going on. So it's been really nice of just someone was doing a face mask and wanted us to see the picture, and somebody else has found a couple that's doing like a lunchtime dance routine and records herself, and we just kind of laugh at her dancing, which is great. And so that's been kind of fun. I've gotten a lot of pictures of my nieces and nephews playing. So that's kind of how I've unplugged. I did stop notifications on CNN yesterday because it was becoming a lot. But again, it's inevitable. You're everywhere I turn, I think it's there, and that's fine. I do like to stay informed, but I think if I can control not getting a notification every hour would be nice. That's kind of what I've done.
Yeah, I love that idea. And even this webinar saying, let's share strategies, and each of us has to find the strategy that's right for you. But for you, it's like, it's not that you're saying there's no news. It's you're saying you recognize that those notifications were starting to cause distress in a way that you didn't want anymore. That's a really good realization.
Yeah. And I think even with the notifications, there's so much uncertainty for the future. We don't really know. Sometimes you hear this is for the next 4 weeks, and then it's, it was 2 weeks we were going to be online, and now it's the rest of the quarter. So given this uncertainty, what are some strategies for just focusing on now and not thinking that this is going to be forever? I think I know my mom thinks this is going to be forever, and I'm like, no, it's just like currently, but then I also can't be like, it'll be fine in a month, because we just don't know. So dealing with the uncertainty and the unknown, what are some tips?
Yeah, great question. I think I mean, first of all, understanding that to the best of our knowledge, this isn't going to be forever. You know,
Yeah.
if you look back at history and you say there are these really difficult, dark times, and then you get out to the other side, and we will get out to the other side. And so to have that confidence that this isn't forever, and we don't know how long it's going to be. And I think for all of us, you know, information junkies, and you think about our society right now and this kind of belief that we have so much control and that we can make all these plans and that we're so precise with our plans. And this challenges all of that in a really interesting way, that we can say, in all likelihood, this is going to pass and we don't know how long. So what do we do for now? To not feel hopeless, to feel hopeful, to look forward to it being over, and simultaneously to say, I don't know when that can be. So I think a lot of the answer to that is being really clear about what's in our control and what's not in our control. And if you think about what's in our control, that gets to the title of the webinar again, taking the best care we can of ourselves and of each other. And that's just a huge coping strategy.
Yeah. And so how do you find kind of creating your own bags of tricks of what works well for you as a person? Like, how would you suggest doing that in a time of, I'm not going to say social distancing because you did mention something earlier, in times of physical distancing, how do we kind of find some meditation outlets or some outlets that'll help us get through this?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer your question in a kind of long way, because we did have this conversation before. I had a faculty member who pointed out that he had seen someplace, and then I couldn't find the reference, that we should call it physical distancing and not social distancing, because in reality, in times of high stress and trauma, people fare best when they really feel supported by their social networks and when they turn to each other. And so if social distancing means that you're not turning to other people, that's problematic. However, the turning to other people isn't going to be the only way that we can do self-care or manage that. So I think when you said, what are the ways that we know that? I mean, first of all, I would say very explicitly, kind of take some time each day to check in with yourself and ask yourself what worked and what didn't. And that might be, you know, a little something in your journal each night before you go to bed, or, you know, when you wake up in the morning, just saying what worked yesterday and what didn't. And so pay attention, because this is a time when you can't just kind of unconsciously by habit rely on your old strategies. You're likely to have to develop new ones. Now, when you say, how do we find those resources? Gosh, there's lots of places. I mean, the Graduate School of Professional Psychology is going to up our resource page. So you could, you know, look at kind of Googling DU, but if you Google American Psychological Association, Colorado Psychological Association, there's lots of places that have resources, and even online education, online meditation, on other kinds of online resources are going to be available. So take the initiative and kind of look, and then be willing to experiment to see what works for you. Do you have any practice like that yourself?
Well, I liked what you said about my partner and I really like trying new restaurants, but I like the fact that you reframed it in, now it's a time and opportunity to not learn how to cook, but cook some like recipes that you've been interested in. So I think finding things that I enjoy and then figuring out how to do it in physical distancing space. I have had FaceTime coffee with a couple friends, and we're thinking about doing a face mask Fridays tomorrow. If anyone wants to join. I really enjoy skincare, so I've kind of just focused on doing a mask a day, which might not be great for my skin, but it helps. Just doing a lot of things on FaceTime has been really helpful.
Yeah.
But definitely trying reframing, like maybe doing a virtual happy hour, because we like to do happy hour. So things like that. So yeah, so now we're gonna move into another like set of topics, but I haven't had this issue with my mom, but I know a lot of people are having issues speaking to their parents that are at risk and get them to understand the health risk and how to apply that at a practical level. So how do we keep spirits high with our at-risk communities while they're on lockdown or physical distancing?
Yeah, that's a hard one. especially, well, and again, a lot of what we're talking about today is really acknowledging what's hard. So I'm going to try to give a lot of positive suggestions, and you've already mentioned reframing things, which ultimately is where we need to go. But I think starting with just acknowledging whether it is seniors, whether it's I mean, literal older adults, or whether it's seniors in high school who are not getting to do the things that they expected to do, to take the time to really acknowledge, this stinks. This is lousy. This is really hard. This is not what any of us wants. And if you're feeling distress, of course, that is incredibly normal, because this is just difficult. Yeah. Once you acknowledge that, though, and sometimes just taking the time to process that. So when you say, with older adults or whatever, gosh, what's it like to find yourself in this situation? Especially, I know people in my age group, many of us are in that age group or close to that age group where we're at risk. We feel healthy. We feel young. The idea that somebody's telling us to not go out is kind of shocking. But to take that seriously and listen to it and say that it's hard, and then say, how are we going to cope with it? And so I think then to focus, you can't go out, but what can you do instead?
Yeah. And I think on the other end of it, it's those that aren't particularly too much at risk, like myself, and who aren't necessarily taking the social distance seriously. And I can say that I was guilty of this maybe 2 weeks ago, when I was like, well, it doesn't seem that bad, and it didn't feel as bad 2 weeks ago. But how do we best engage with people who are really not taking it seriously still, where we are right now?
First of all, do not get physically close to them. Those are the people that you want to really watch out for. So I think part of that notion, you can only control yourself. You can't control other people. So if you're keeping your distance from those people, and we're all doing that, in some ways, it's going to start to enforce that culture change. Yeah. I think, again, it's fine to say, I love the way that you just said it. Hey, I felt that way before too. I'm not in a high risk group, so I want to pretend that this isn't really happening. Yeah. But in reality, we owe it to ourselves and to our community to practice what's being recommended.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is kind of a long-winded question, but I would love to hear some factual information about how people's decision-making paradigms change under this kind of stress.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and like most things, it kind of cuts both ways. I think, when people are anxious, when people are super anxious, they tend to not think as clearly. You kind of can't. You need to recognize that if you're making some kind of big decision, you're not going to be likely to be thinking as clearly, and depending on your own interpersonal style, you may be either really impulsive, and there may be a feeling like, well, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. I might as well, spend my whole savings or whatever. Or you might go exactly the opposite direction and say, it's only, I can't spend any money because I've got to hold on to it. And I think one suggestion would be watching for those extremes, knowing yourself well enough to know, how you might err on the side of either caution or impulsivity. But the bigger thing is, I want to lead people back to your social networks. If you have decisions to make, get on a FaceTime call and talk to somebody about it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I saw a meme, sorry if you're not memes, but about how I love memes, but I didn't realize how many subscriptions I had on Gmail for like clothing stores until I had time to actually run through my Gmail account, and how many people are trying to catch you on like being home and being on your computer and sending you like, hey, here's a sale. So just being very mindful of unsubscribing to those. And so that's kind of something I've done.
Well, Abigail, let me even follow up on that, because when I'm saying, this is a time for self-knowledge, which is great, but what you just shared, if you're sharing that with your friends, they can tease you a little bit and say, hey, what'd you buy today, or whatever, and help you with that decision making. And it might be that you get a great deal, and some online shopping could be perfect when your finals are over, of course.
Yeah.
But maybe not.
Definitely not. Not on a grad student budget. So, this is kind of the more important, like a very important question for me, because I think there's a sense of mourning some type of loss, a loss of celebrating a lot of important milestones. I really feel for a lot of people that are not going to get to celebrate their graduations. They're not going to get to go to prom. They're not going to get to celebrate birthdays. So I kind of want to explain the importance of continuing those celebrations and not just seeing it as like a loss and like, it feels like I did all this hard work and now I can't be celebrated for it. So how do we continue to celebrate that and the importance of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question because, you know, in addition to human beings being very social, rituals are really important to us. They're very organizing. We look forward to them and then we remember them. And to not have our rituals right now is really problematic. And yet we can't just fall back on the way that we've done our rituals in the past. So I think committing to finding new ways to celebrate whatever needs to be celebrated is really important. I can think of, actually, I have this situation with a handful of different people. So the person will not know who they are when I'm talking about this. We were talking about baby showers coming up. And so not being able to do in-person baby showers and when, you know, baby's going to be born the end of May, we're not going to get together before the baby comes for the baby shower. But to know that we can order the things online, to know that we're going to try to do a virtual baby shower and ask the person to open all the presents or show them so that we can all, like you do in baby showers, say, oh, and, you know, show me that. And I remember when my kid had that. And then what else we can do to make that feel like a ritual that we're going to remember, that we're going to look back and say, remember that baby shower in April 2020 is important. I think second to that, though, some of these things, we're talking about this in our department. We have a big internship party where we celebrate people going off on internship that is likely to be canceled. And that maybe we're going to just have a much bigger graduation party for those students next year. So I think that once we get out of this, there's going to be a lot of pent-up energy for those other kinds of celebrations. If you missed your birthday, then I think the odds are high you can do a half your birthday in 6 months. I would recommend that, for example, in addition to doing something now.
Yeah. I think as a team, we'll just make that executive decision. Half birthdays are okay.
Yes.
So, and then this is going back into like an academic space. I think as we go into the spring quarter and finishing finals, there's a lot of anxiety around virtual learning and how do we support those that are struggling with that aspect of what's about to happen, especially in the spring quarter for 10 weeks.
Yeah. Boy, we're having so many conversations about that in our department, and it's funny because we already have one fully online program in sport coaching, and so we have some faculty members that do only online pedagogy, and their students are used to that, and they're so creative, and it's a real thing. It's not just okay, we'll make do. It is people are really learning and getting powerful skills and competencies. But boy, for those of us that haven't done that before, it's huge. And there's a learning curve just in learning how to learn, not just not learning the material. So I think being patient with each other, being forgiving. I know that the provost is telling all the other deans, you've got to have a lot of leniency in terms of just accepting that there's not going to be a one size fits all in how you do this. And I don't know about for you. You said that you've taken one online course. There are many of us that have resisted and we can't resist anymore. We just can't.
I took an online stats class and I think it went well. What I had mentioned earlier was that I really hate discussion boards, and I'm scared that a lot of faculty are going to resort to discussion board only, but I think the loss of the information that I learned from my peers in the conversations that we have in classrooms is going to be missed. So figuring out how to still have those conversations and people maintain that type of engagement, it's really hard. I mean, I was on Zoom for maybe 4 hours yesterday. To have a 3-hour class on Zoom, I'm like, that might be a little bit of a struggle where everyone can see every facial expression. I think that's going to be difficult. So just learning a couple things that I know that I'm going to have to do on my own, of some tips and tricks of maintaining my composure over Zoom and some Zoom etiquette. But yeah, kind of nervous just about the lack of options and diversity that we might have given where we're at.
Yeah. Well, easier said than done. And I already started with, I mean, we need to be realistic that we didn't choose this. It's not all only positive, but there clearly are going to be a lot of opportunities that we're going to find about knowing more about your learning style. Frankly, I said, the provost have encouraged the deans to encourage their faculty to be lenient with students. And I would encourage students to be understanding and patient with their professors, but don't be resigned. Like, have high standards for us too. Push us to use this opportunity to do better and to figure out how we can serve you through this. Don't be shy about that.
Thanks. So those are all my questions, so we can definitely open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, we got it. Good. Here comes Anne.
Hi. Yeah. So we've had some great questions that have come through, and I'm kind of recording some nuggets so that I can post about them a little bit later. I'm curious about, let's see. I was curious, I just want to go back because we were just so recently on the celebrating, to kind of elaborate on that, Shelly. I had some questions submitted prior to this where people are talking about actually feeling guilty about celebrating, feeling like so many people are going through a rough, that this is so hard that they just feel like celebrating doesn't hit right now. What kind of advice would you have for that?
Well, I think like everything, there's not going to be one answer, or you have to, if you're feeling guilty about it, then, asking yourself why is helpful. But in general, I would say, I mean, again, being part of the human community, it's important that we still have some celebrations, and that can be a way of coming together. And it's about sharing the human experience. So maybe someone would say, oh, I don't want to have a birthday party, even if it's a virtual birthday party, because, my friends work in restaurants and they're out of jobs. And to be sensitive to the fact that, oh, guess what? I thought you were going to get me an expensive gift card to your restaurant, and now you can't get me a present, is fine. But that doesn't mean you can't say, let's not celebrate my birthday. It's how do we get creative and do it in a way that we all feel good about it, because the person who's out of the job is going to feel better celebrating your birthday than not.
Right. I love that, because I feel like you're giving all of us permission to go ahead with that. And sometimes getting that permission is really helpful. Somewhat, let's see, talking about faculty and I think also staff directly, I think everybody's feeling such a responsibility to respond to COVID and then to balance sort of the personal responsibilities that we have as well. What would you, this is a question from Rohini, what's your advice to think about how do we take care of the professional side and the personal side and manage some of that? It's kind of circling back to a bit of the conversation we were having at the beginning.
Well, I think first of all, and the fact that you're leading up this initiative and inviting people as a community, not only to come together, but to talk about what they need. So I fully expect that after this webinar, there are going to be other requests, and having a place where your requests are going to be heard is really important. And so, for anybody here at the university, and I'm guessing this fits for all of those virtual workplaces, that knowing that you're in touch with your supervisors and people that you work with, just to talk about, just to check in, how's it going? What else do you need? What else could we be doing to support this time is really helpful. The personal piece, I mean, there are lots of resources out there, and they're going to be really different things that people are going to need. I had mentioned, because my kids are grown, it's kind of mind-boggling to me to think that we're expecting people to work from home and take care of their kids all at the same time. Like, how is that really supposed to happen? And that may be some different kind of strategies or webinars or whatever that we try to come up with. I'm sure that it can work, but I don't know exactly how it will work. So one area of personal stress would be if you've got kids at home and you're trying to get some work done, are you connecting to other people? Are you part of a group of parents where you're comparing notes, to where you're sharing strategies? I certainly felt that when I had kids at home, that collective energy of knowing that you could turn to other people going through the same way, honestly, not whitewashing it,
Yeah.
not making it worse than it is, but really sharing resources is super helpful.
I think that's right. And I want to highlight the Shelly School, the graduate school for professional psychology, is doing a daily dance party, right, Shelly? For youngsters. I will be joining tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning with a few of my boys to dance it out. And I heard that it was actually really successful, kind of getting the wiggles out in the morning for people who have to, turn with their kids then and try to get them to sit down. In a virtual learning space is interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other thing, I keep talking about sharing resources and using relationships in that way, which is important. Certainly there are a lot of things that you're going to see on any kind of a self-care kind of website talking about the importance of keeping routines, and that, whether you have kids or not, knowing that you need a daily routine. I have a good friend who works from home saying, what are the helpful hints? Because she's great at that, and said, everybody believes, oh, this is great. I can work from home. I can stay in my pajamas all day. Probably staying in your pajamas all day is not going to be great for your mental health and getting through this. You may not have to put on your work clothes, but the idea of having a structure, having some kind of organization, having a routine is really helpful. And then in it, that routine needs to include some kind of physical activity. It needs to include that you've got social time. It needs to have some focus time where you can actually get work done. It needs to include good nutrition. You've got to, if you're used to a certain kind of routine and then you lose it, if you're used to eating lunch with colleagues at work and now you have to eat lunch by yourself, there are so many different things to pay attention to in that way, in terms of really thinking of what a healthy routine is for you and for your family at home.
Right. Do you have any specific advice? We have a question that's come through from Michelle around teenagers, and just kind of saying, teenagers can kind of manifest this anxiety in, I've got one in my house. He's manifesting it right now by sleeping all day. But also can get a little bit perhaps wild or mean, or taking it out on their siblings. How do you suggest we talk to teenagers about this?
The first rule of thumb is trying really hard to listen more than you talk, not just with teenagers, but usually with human beings. But that can be especially helpful with teenagers. When teenagers want to talk to each other and not to their parents, that can be especially difficult to listen if they're not talking, obviously. But trying to find different ways to get them to talk so that they're sharing would be my first part of the key.
Okay.
And I think, this may be a bit of a tangent, but I'm a huge proponent of family dinners. And I think that a lot of what's happened in our culture with sports and different activities is that people haven't gotten to where they do those every night. And now, not even by choice, you're practically required to do that. And I think that's such a good opportunity. There's so much research that talk about, family meals and family dinners being really good, not just for kids, but for teenagers too. Along that line with teenagers though, and if you're doing family dinners, I think having conversation starters, having ways to share about your day that are a little bit more creative, not just how was your day, end of story, but trying to be creative about engaging in conversation would be one thing. I think with anxiety, if you can be really empathic with saying this is hard, and also be clear, this is not catastrophic. And for some people, it may end up being catastrophic if you lose a family member or something like that. For most of us here in Denver right now, it's not catastrophic, that we're ideally, we've got enough safety net in place where, you know, if people have financial concerns, they're going to be solved. That again, if we're turning towards each other and have that resource of each other, your teenagers have you in the home, then you say, this is really hard and it's not catastrophic. It's going to be okay in the end. I can't wait till it's okay. You feel the same way. And how do we learn from this? How do we ultimately make the best of this? And some of that may be, you know, if you're listening, it may be, well, you know, I can't make the best of this because, you know, X, Y, or Z is going to happen. You know, this is the first pandemic and they're going to happen every 6 months and
Right.
you know, I'll never have a family, or, you know, I mean, you can listen to what those fears are and try to surface them and hear where they're coming from and be genuinely reassuring, not dismissive, but genuinely reassuring at that point. The other thing with teenagers though is what are their ways to connect going to be like, and I'm scratching my head about that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a lot of, experimenting with different kinds of social media and FaceTiming. And I did a kind of a happy hour with a group of friends that are all across the country the other night, my husband and I did. And it was interesting to see the boys popping in and out of the room and kind of thinking, wow, what's my version of this look like? And for my little guys, I think it may be your dance party. So to start, which would be good.
Yeah, and I think recognizing that, you know, we've used technology already to check in with each other or to look at each other's pictures, almost to observe each other, but not always to really interact in a truly bidirectional way to make the technology interactive. And that's what we're going to need to think more about.
Yeah. There was a really interesting question submitted by Nancy Richmond, who's part of the CWC crew, about how do you think around, you know, this in this Zoom culture. I was looking at my face and I realized I was doing something funny with my tongue a minute ago, and we're sort of under a microscope, and that can be anxiety producing in and of itself. And then also if we're in a position where we're teaching or the one that's speaking, running a meeting, how do we think about that? It captures every facial expression. Yep. It's not like you can kind of turn in a meeting or, you know, you've really got to watch those eye rolls. What coaching do you have?
Yeah, I loved Abigail pointing that out because I think, you know, as a professor myself, I think, oh, good, the students get to watch those faces that they're making when I'm saying something. Like there's some increased self-knowledge in all of that. But you do have to be aware that it's there and it can be observed. It's always been observed probably, but it just makes us self-conscious and not get caught in that self-consciousness, but to try to really stay engaged with the other person, I think is one of the tips that I would have. I think a second one, well, the other association that I have is at the Graduate School of Professional Psychology, we have a training clinic here. And I will say at this moment in time, because we've just transitioned to all telehealth services, we're not accepting new clients at the moment. Stay tuned, watch our website. As we get further along the road, we may be accepting new clients and we will be able to help people find where to get other kinds of telepsychology services. When we were working face-to-face, all of the students had all of their work observed, and students had to get acclimated to watching themselves on tape and to understanding their verbal tics and their physical tics and just the ways that they operate. And it's always part of a learning process to kind of watch and then ultimately accept yourself. People are always, or not always, but generally pretty self-critical at the beginning, and it feels awkward. And then ultimately, if you face that and think, oh, I interrupt a lot, or I say too much, or my voice goes up and down in a very traditionally female way. Is that okay with me, or is that not? You can think about these things in a helpful way. There's knowledge to be gained.
That's really interesting that you actually have a practice of doing that, and it makes perfect sense. Here's another sort of courageous conversation question. Somebody has said, that their manager is really not taking this very seriously and not checking in on them on a personal level, but focusing more on, hey, how are we maintaining productivity? Let's, you know, keep on task here. How do you suggest people, if they're experiencing that? I think from a leader is the question specifically, but I think also from teammates. How do you have those kinds of conversations, and how can we affect a different kind of culture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really great question, because, you know, if you look at the literature on high performance teams, they're almost always good at relationship and task both, not either or.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is unfair. I'm guessing that this person's manager wasn't really great about these things before this all happened anyway. And sometimes times of challenge or crisis are the times that things can actually improve or get better. So it might be with that manager, you know, to be able to explicitly say, hey, I was, you know, listening to a podcast or this and that. People were talking about working in a virtual environment and mentioning how helpful it is just to take a few minutes to check in, you know, that makes the virtual environment feel more real and ultimately is going to feel more productive. I mean, you might literally be able to suggest it. Again, if the person isn't asking, that might not necessarily go anyplace. I think within teams, there's a quality that you might be able to create that with your teammates instead of with your supervisor. So I think knowing that can be helpful. The good thing is knowing if you want that kind of connection and support, that's healthy, that's not unhealthy. So to recognize that in yourself, and then to think of how to get that.
I think that makes sense. I had someone on our team suggest the other day that maybe we just need a 15-minute really brief check-in on a daily basis, just simply to check in with each other, not even to check in on the work. And so someone on my team has created it. We're doing a team hug every day, which feels really good, just for 15 minutes. And so I was really appreciative that they suggested that, and I think it'll just be good for everyone. So
there are so many things. I mean, first of all, there was a conversation that maybe some of you heard because it was right before we started here, but before we were on, about one of the teams at DU that's having to meet virtually every day, and the way that they're actually starting to look forward to those meetings because they're working together more closely than they ever did.
Right.
And they are checking in on one another. Like it's in some ways, in an interesting way, creating contact that wasn't there before. I think also, though, there's that informal contact that you get, you know, walking to the microwave or whatever and checking in with people, and knowing that we need to replace that.
Right. Kyle just submitted a question that was about how do you, if you want to let your team know that you're going through something that's a little bit difficult. So the example that he used is, I have a friend that's being tested and we're waiting for those results. And I want to be able to tell my team that, but I don't know, sort of how do you figure out where those boundaries are in this world? Because inevitably, as things progress, we're probably all going to come a little bit closer to some of these circumstances. So how do you interact with people? How do you judge? I mean, I even wonder this because I wonder how much anxiety am I going to provoke or share? As a leader with my team, I want to be kind of careful. But how do I be authentic, or how, in this case, how does Kyle be authentic and share that, but kind of know where the boundaries are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Human beings are so complicated because it's not an easy. It's a really, really good question. We know that anxiety is contagious, and so but we also know that it works better. Managing our anxiety works better when we're sharing it with other people. So I would say taking that little bit of time just to think about who's the best person to turn to, or what's the best venue, what's the best format. Not should I share or not share, but how do I think about sharing, and where do I do that? And if, there's so much variability depending on what your team norms are, what your team is like. You might imagine at the Graduate School of Professional Psychology, we share a lot, and in our culture, the idea that bringing that to your team and saying, oh my gosh, I just had a friend that is, seems ill and it's scary and they're waiting for results, and how do you handle that? That's something that fits our culture really well. If that doesn't fit your work culture, then you might want to think of a person or two to confide in first, and think about how that will go.
Yeah. We have a question also about graduating seniors, to dive a little bit more deeply into those celebrations. And there are so many areas, you know, the final celebrations, the capstone projects that sometimes we do here at DU, and not being able to present those. Just kind of, how do we think about those kinds of bringing things to a closure that doesn't feel like a cliff, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I will just offer is, and I will figure out how to get this out to the person who asked about it, and maybe to the whole group, I can figure that out. There is on Facebook a place where students have started to gather to be able to actually do their presentations to one another. Mm-hmm. And it's a really neat community that has come together. They're creating rooms to present capstone projects, and they're getting it even in some cases in front of a bigger audience. So there's a different kind of satisfaction and fulfillment that comes with that. So those resources are out there. I just wanted to let folks know that I'd heard of them, but specifically just that, you know, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think being in touch, you know, if you're a student, being in touch with your teachers, professors, asking these questions, saying, we really want to figure this out. I know that this isn't exactly what you're asking, and I will get to that. But for example, we had a group of students who were going to do professional presentations at a conference that got canceled. And we're trying to figure out how can we do our own virtual conference here this quarter, so that
cool.
We did the first step. Like American Psychological Association came out and said, if your poster or presentation was accepted at a conference, you can still list that on your resume. So I think we're really good at the kind of very practical, operational, we want to be sure that this doesn't stop you from getting your requirements met. But the question is much bigger than just saying, oh, you're still going to graduate, you're going to get a diploma, so that's okay. That doesn't really fulfill what people need out of these experiences. Right. So the first thing that I would say is ask your senior what they're going to be missing out of their graduation, what they were looking forward to, not only empathizing in why this is disappointing, but then also seeing what you can create virtually from that when you ask the question. So probably a senior wouldn't say, but I can remember when my kids graduated from high school, what I loved was all the family parties and kind of going to see, you know, the kids that I had known since they were little. Well, at some point in the summer, we'll likely have the family party, but maybe instead you would have families share the baby pictures with each other, or,
right.
I mean, there are all kinds of things you think, what's the meaning behind what you're looking for, and how to try to stick with that. And not just to give up and say we can't do it, to say this is hard and frustrating, I empathize with you, and let's get really creative about what we're going to do instead. In fact, I did want to highlight something that Abigail was referring to earlier that we haven't said super explicitly, which is about creativity and the way that we can get creative. This pushes us to be creative in ways that we haven't thought about yet, whether that is, one of my neighbors is a professional musician who's also an older adult, and so feeling kind of isolated. And he opened all his doors and windows and did a concert for the neighbors yesterday.
Oh,
I know people are hearing about that, like they're doing that in Italy or whatever, but I thought, oh, that's so creative. You know, he just emailed all the neighbors and said, you know, open your doors and windows and have a listen. And there it was. And I think that kind of creativity we're going to be seeing more and more. So what's going to replace a high school graduation? People are going to start getting creative about that pretty soon, I think.
And I think this generation of graduates is extraordinary. When you think of some of the things that they've done in terms of social justice action and entrepreneurship already, I think we're going to see some really neat stuff, which would be good. So what advice do you have for people who are living alone in particular, and thinking about that?
Yeah, that is a really hard one. And I think particularly, I mean, if somebody is in a high risk group and living alone, then they probably are not going to want to have social contact,
right?
In terms of the physical social contact. But I think for people who are living alone, who are not in high risk groups, that idea of, you know, going to the park, keeping your physical distance, but knowing that you can spend time with other people. We're really lucky, maybe not right at the moment as I look out the window at the snow coming down, but typically, you know, when the weather is nice, people can get out to the park and keep that physical distance and still be with other people. So I would say thinking about, particularly if you live alone, if there are other ways that you can be with other people, that's important.
Right.
But secondly, with the routine, just knowing you've built in enough social contact virtually into your day, and having that be really important. The other idea I heard for people who live alone is taking turns kind of running errands for each other or doing things for each other. So you have
Right.
that, you know, almost sense of being taken care of, even if you're by yourself, making you
Right.
feel alone.
I think that's great. Our block actually has a little bit of a blog going on, or not a blog, but a chat going on about that. I'm going to Costco today. What can I drop off at your on your porch? And it does just kind of connect you in nice ways. So let's just shift in the last few minutes that we have to some resource ideas that you might have, Shelly. So one of our participants asked about mindfulness specifically.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that post, but what do you have to suggest on that front? I want to add to that. To me, mindfulness is so broad that sometimes it's hard for me to get my arms around. So what is it for you, and how do you really practice it? Or I don't know, how do you define that?
Yeah. That question has come up a few times here because we do have faculty members who incorporate mindfulness in some of the psychotherapy that they do. And so I hope this can be something that we can develop once their courses are all developed,
Right.
and we get to focus on that first. So I don't have anything off the top of my head other than I mentioned Colorado Psychological Association would be a place to start with that kind of question. Can you link me to some mindfulness resources? I'm guessing that some of those are going to be available. Like we'll have some of those links available through our website pretty soon. So I would say look at Graduate School Professional Psychology or Colorado Psychological Association as a place to start. A second thing I would say, well, and American Psychological Association just has a huge list of kind of websites and different resources. So I'm guessing that some of those will be available. What you mentioned, Anne, though, I think is really important, and I keep coming back to self-knowledge, knowing what works for you. So you might try, you know, a mindfulness podcast that was recommended by one of my faculty members, and feel like, this didn't do anything for me. And that's fine. It might work really well for somebody else. And it might mean that you need to keep looking, and that you need to keep looking. Actually, I see a couple of people are sharing resources along the chat. So one of the things that we'll want to do after this is to figure out how to incorporate those resources for people who have been on the chat as well. So you and I can put our heads together about pushing that out from here. The other thing I want to get back to, though, in terms of that not having a one-size-fits-all and knowing yourself enough to know what works, any of the organizations that you are familiar with, it's really good to check in with them and ask them if they have anything in the works. I think many of us are scrambling right now, just trying to figure out what will be helpful. So asking for what you need is gonna be helpful. I know in my world, my church has offered a virtual church service where, keeping physical distance, the people who put on the service, the musician, the minister, and all of that, did a Facebook live stream where we all then could sign in on the chat and say we were there and say hi to each other, which was very satisfying. And then there's, during Lent, they do a mindfulness service. And so they created a mindfulness podcast that we can use since we can't go to that mindfulness service. So I'm guessing, you know, that for people to look around and see, they're going to be just in the next couple of weeks more and more of those things available.
That'd be good. We have one other question that's come in just about specifically around if we're experiencing something that's a little bit more acute. So like a panic attack, or feeling like we're spiraling out of control a little bit. I'm curious what resources are out there that we should be reaching out to, but also how do you sort of manage that in the moment for yourself as well?
So to reiterate and remember some of the very basic things that we all know, that when you're feeling panicked, you're not going to remember.
Yeah.
And know that you can practice them times when you're not being panicked. I mean, again, I'm saying, as psychologists, there are a lot of what sound like, I think, pretty geeky practices that many of us have. You know, that list of self-care practices that you refer to for times of stress. I would be making that list for you. What are the 10 things that I should remember when I'm feeling extra stressed that I can turn to? And so it can be breathing. It can be adding people that you want to explicitly call. It can be asking friends to call you when they're distressed, so you feel really useful and valued. But it may be getting outside. It may be, I already talked about my cooking, but for me, there are things like my pile of magazines that are just incredibly reassuring. So, you're saying that if you're in acute distress, a cookbook may not do it for you, but having this list of 10 practices that you're going to engage in daily is going to be reassuring and may prevent that panic attack. Literally, if you feel that you're starting to spiral, like this is surfacing something that feels really acute, there are a lot of, certainly, Mental Health Center of Denver, there's a Colorado crisis line. In fact, well, we'll add this to our resources. I wrote down the phone number, that they're going to be really good at doing triage to know at this moment in time who's accepting new clients, who can you talk to, just in just to say, wow, this is feeling really hard. Can you give me some ideas of some very direct resources? And the particularly good thing right now, I had mentioned my clinic moving to telehealth services. The mental health community right now is really mobilized in a big way to say we want to have virtual services accessible to folks right now. And I mean, the people have had foot on the gas for this last week. There's going to be more and more of that available. So don't be shy about asking.
That's great. Well, I want to kind of wrap this up for everyone. I want to say thank you so much to you, Shelly. Thank you for doing this and pulling it together on relatively short notice, listening to the needs of our community. We're so grateful. Abigail, you've disappeared, but just off screen, I know that you're there.
We were Abigail.
Behind the scenes. Thank you so much. Also, and I want to just say thank you also to the C+V team. There are a few people behind the scenes, one of whom is Chase McNamee. His email is in front of you. He offered to have his email be a place where we can take anybody who wants to become involved with Community Plus Values. We love to have volunteers in this project, but also if you have ideas, if you have feedback for us on this, if you have ideas, that would be terrific. We have a C+V website. Also, you can find it by searching for Community Plus Values on the DU website, and we will be posting a link to this, and we're also opening a Facebook group and an Instagram group. So there'll be a lot of ways for us to be in touch, but mostly I just want to say I'm so grateful to be a part of the community and connect with you all in this way in my funny little home office. So I hope that this has brought a little bit of pressure valve to your life today. And DU really is a place that that really does care when you kind of get into some of these personal relationships. And I know it's a place that we many of us experience that, and we struggle with it too. And so the whole point of this is to kind of knit us together in a stronger way. So that's at the heart of my gratitude for everybody showing up here, and everybody who's not officially in the DU community. We consider you part of us. So thank you for being here too. All right.
Yeah, and thanks to Anne and the rest of the team for putting this on. Really grateful for this effort.
Yeah, more to come. Take care.
Good.